So yeah, this was the road to I say the dream job because I work for Mediatonic and I'm actually an employee of Epic Games now, since they bought the company literally a month ago. Um, so yeah, I'll go through this presentation. Please bear with me on my presentation skills. I've just joined a new job and my presentation skills were bad anyway. But so I obviously was at Solent. I graduated in 2019 with a 2-1. So if you're worried that you're not on track for a first and you won't get a job in the games industry, that's not a limiting factor. They care much more about who you are as a person. I actually completed my induction week with probably some of you final years because I was on a top-up degree from a HND. So I only spent 1 year at Solent. So I only got 1 year of having to listen to Costas and the other, the other lecturers, which is either a blessing or a curse, I'm not sure. But so yeah, so I completed my induction week with some of you. I know some people on the call I recognize, like Josh, and some of the other guys. And in my induction week, I actually still have them, but I was part of the teams that won like multiple awards that week, which, if you did things like that, great for interviews and talking about that in the future. Myself, Costas, and Ethan kind of, I believe, reinvigorated VJ. I can't remember if it was really a thing before, but the Discord for VJ was set up while we were there, and me and Ethan sort of helped promote that. And we also, for again some of you third years, we hosted sort of tutorials on Wednesday afternoons. So it was kind of third years giving back to first and second years. So that took up a lot of my time, as well as trying to get all my coursework done. And with Ethan, we released a joint FMP, which was a VR game we released on Steam. But my time at Solent was great. It was kind of the perfect cauldron of everything that I needed to prepare myself to always be outside my comfort zone for when I entered the industry, because the industry just moves so fast that being able to keep up with it is very difficult. And I think from everyone that I've spoken to, Solent has some of the best lecturers to prepare you guys for that. And so I think, you guys leaning on them as much as you can is so important. So I finished Solent, and just before I graduate, like had my graduation ceremony, I was like, right, how am I actually going to enter the industry? It's so difficult. I was coming off, actually, I should say, I was on a design top-up course. So I was a designer by trade at university. And so my answer was just to apply everywhere for everything, anything to do with design, anything to do with QA as well, which I was sort of shown down the track of by Neil Brewis, one of the lecturers. And QA was sort of a fantastic route in for myself, and I'll go through that. But yeah, I applied everywhere. I had interviews with Playground Games, Hutch Studios mobile company, First Touch Studios, Sports Interactive, who make Football Manager. And I learned so much from each one. Playground was obviously, AAA developer making Forza for Xbox, and that was a very, very difficult interview where they asked some very high level questions. And that was kind of the test for me to see how I held up in interviews. And at each one I learned one. So if you're having interviews and someone asked a question to Kelly, I had a rejection. Rejections pretty normal in the games industry. A lot of time you may never even hear back with your application. So just don't give up and just keep at it, because each interview will learn something, and that's the most important thing. And so I then was offered a 3-month contract at Sports Interactive. I, at the time, was kind of unsure because it was such a short contract. I was like, oh, maybe I should keep looking for a job. But in the back of my head, I was like, well, it's a foot in the door. And in 3 months' time, I could still be looking for a job. So I did take it, and I was there. I was fortunately there over the September-October period where the game comes out. So I was credited on my first game, which, as someone in the industry is important, and was a very proud moment for myself. And those 3 months went by, as you can imagine, in an absolute flash. But I got my first taste of using all of the industry standards for bugs, design processes, just being around different teams. And QA is great for that, because you do just get to spend so much time around every team, because you're not just dealing with one specific team, although that can be the case. and that's something I go into a little bit further on. But so that 3-month contract came to an end, and I wasn't too sure. I got the taste of a big AAA sort of environment, and I was like, wow, this is a really cool place to work. And I started applying again, and I just didn't get the same. Even though I had this experience behind me, it wasn't like an immediate opening of a door. And so I started looking at the industry, and similar to Kelly went to a third party company who weren't involved in the games industry. I went sort of a middle road, and I was offered a role at Feral Interactive, who probably most of you have never heard of. But they have been for most of their existence a third-party porting company. So they move games from PC to Mac and Linux, and then more recently they've been moving games to mobile and games to Switch. And so in my interview, I was kind of like, I'm not sure this is the place for me. It was quite quiet. It was more like almost like an IT company. Everyone's heads down, no one really talking to each other. A very different environment to what I was looking for in my dream job. But when I started speaking to the interview and I got some information out of them, I realized, even though sometimes interviews can be cagey because there's the NDAs that the non-disclosures, which they're not willing to tell you a lot, and you obviously the same with you when you start moving companies, you can't speak about all of your prior experience. But I found out pretty quickly that they worked on some AAA games, and for the next 18 months, which led me up to last month, I got to work on all of these titles there. So all of these titles were ported while I was there. And so I got to go through the process in all of these different genres, all of these different games. And I really just got so much better and more confident in what I was doing. Because, if you look at these titles, especially like the Total War games, they're played by a very sort of fierce fan base. And so you're there trying to put your best output all the time. And someone like Feral, the work can be hard. I experienced crunch there a few times, which is sort of a forbidden word in a lot of the industry. But, as a third party, you're probably more likely to experience it just because you're working on other people's deadlines. Your company's paid to do a job and you've got to get it done. But what third parties offer you that no one else can is this exposure in the industry. And so, yeah, some of these games, Company of Heroes 2, we released on mobile, XCOM 2 released on mobile. I'm credited on both of those, and had I sort of started veering towards mobile development as my sort of speciality. And as Kelly said, specializing in the industry is very important if you want to climb up. And I was fortunate enough that within the last year while I was there, Feral were given the task to build from the ground up Rome Total War Remastered. So we were actually the sole first-party developer of that game. And that was a game I loved as a kid. And actually in my interview with them, without knowing they were working on it, I had talked a lot about that game and how it was an important part of the reason I wanted to be in the games industry. So that fitted really well. And as a QA tester on the game, as things were coming down the pipeline and deadlines get tight and we need to come up with solutions, I was able to offer design solutions for major parts of that game and work with the two designers who were designing the game. And so lots of my input ends up going into the game as design input that I had, which for me was really cool and something that I didn't think would come so soon after university, especially not being in a design role. But you realize that QA actually has its hands in everything, and that's something that most people don't understand. People don't go to university to study QA, and so it's really important. It's such an important part of gaming, and obviously I could go into a huge amount of detail of like Cyberpunk and games that have issues with their QA system and they didn't test enough and stuff. But it's such a vital part of every game, and I'm sure everyone who speaks today will agree that QA is, if you don't have a good functioning QA department, the game is probably not going to turn out very well. And so, by the end of that, I was credited on that game as well, which, again, another milestone for me. That was just fantastic. I was a year and a half out of the industry and I've already been credited on 3 or 4 games by this point. But I kind of knew at this point that my time at Feral was kind of coming to an end because I knew the cycle of just working on this, games over and over again where we're porting them isn't really that, for me, wasn't that challenging. And I wanted to be in a first party environment and, find that dream job. And so I started being a bit more tactical about the next job approach. And so I went to LinkedIn and I set my profile as open to work. And these are kind of the key points that I want to get across to you guys in terms of when you're coming out of university now, these are the things you should be doing now. So LinkedIn has this setting where you can set it as open to work. It allows all recruiters to see that you're actively looking. And that means that, I mean, you guys know how algorithms work on social media. If you're open to work and you set the job title of what you're looking for, if a recruiter looks at that, you're going to be at the top of their search results. So that's like key. Connect with every in-house recruiter you can. This sounds like a bit of a weird one because people are like, oh, I don't, lots of people be like, I don't know them, but I've connected with pretty much every in-house recruiter in the UK over the last year, and I chat with lots of them. And what that does is it fills your feed out with just jobs. So you're just seeing jobs come through all the time on your feed on LinkedIn, and it's so important to do that because a lot of companies don't advertise jobs anywhere other than LinkedIn anymore, just because they know that they've got such a good pool of people there, and the industry is just so competitive that they almost don't need to rely on any other sort of marketing for their recruitment drive. Some will put it on their websites. Lots of those things are out of date and not kept up to date as much as a LinkedIn post from an in-house recruiter will be. So make sure you do connect with every in-house recruiter you can. And then the next one is send them all a message immediately as soon as they accept the connection, or even prior to that, just introducing yourself and asking, there aren't any roles on your website. Do you have anything? The worst thing that's going to happen is they're going to say no. Actually, the worst thing that's going to happen is that they won't respond to you, and that's just part of the industry. But you've put yourself out there and you've literally not lost anything by doing so. So making sure that you get yourself out there is so important. And all these things, once you've sent that first message and they've come back to you and said, oh, we don't right now, but I'll make sure I think of you the next time we do. If you keep looking on their website, or you see this recruiter post a job advert that you're interested in, you can send your second, or third message to them and say, hey, I've seen this job go live. Is there any chance I can have a quick call regarding it? And that's how a lot of these things snowball. And most of the recruiters, I've noticed from being in the industry myself for 2 years, they move around a lot. So a recruiter that you connected with and had a chat with, and they really liked you, but maybe it didn't work out at the time, and they were at one company, may have just moved to Rockstar, may have just moved to Epic Games, may have moved to one of these big companies, and that opens the doorway for you. And so you have this network that's just spreading and spreading and spreading. And so that's incredibly important to make sure that you introduce yourself. And then the last thing is to keep updating LinkedIn with posts. So it's the same, again, it's the algorithm, is the more you post, the more you're going to appear on people's feeds. So posting about your FMP, posting about your first job and getting a job in the industry, these things, and hashtag, putting your tags on them, will just alert you to everyone that they can. So I joined Mediatonic 2 weeks ago, and this was my post, and just put, I'm thrilled to join. It got 87 reactions. I got probably 30 or 40 connections from the industry out of that, lots of them recruiters, and it had 7,000 views. So again, I'll probably post in a couple more weeks, and it'll pick up traction, and the algorithm will do my work for me. And obviously, I'm not looking for a job now. I'm kind of where I wanted to be when I finished uni. This was the company I wanted to work for. But yeah, that's how that's why LinkedIn is just so important. And this was kind of I decided I was going to finish with Feral, but I hadn't started interviewing anywhere. I was in full crunch, working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, which lots of you won't want to hear, but if you want to work in the industry, sometimes you have to do it. And I got contacted by Molly, the internal recruiter at Mediatonic, and she said, hey, I've seen you're open to work, like, would you be up for a chat? So I was fortunate enough that she approached me. And I'd actually, before she sent that to me, I had just posted about the release of Rome. So she had probably seen me pop up because I was active on LinkedIn. I then had 2 interviews with head of departments for QA, and some of the team members that I would be working with if I got it. And then right in the middle of that process, Epic had announced that they were buying Mediatonic, and they were going on a hiring freeze until they could sort out the structure of the company and exactly what they wanted to do. And that really threw a bit of a spanner in the works, because I was like, oh, maybe I'm not going to get the role anymore. Maybe Epic are going to decide to cost cut or whatever, to restructure the company. But what it turned out they were doing is, so Mediatonic went from being 30 people last year before Fall Guys released. Now we're at 300. And they're planning on expanding even further with multiple IPs in the works. And Epic Games have basically greenlit everything at Mediatonic to move forward. So they asked me back just for another short interview, which lasted, I think, 20 minutes, where I mainly just talked about Star Wars with the head of QA there, and he just said, yeah, we're re-offering you the role, so we'd really like you to join. And they were like, we really wanted you to start ASAP. And one thing that I think is important in the industry is to remember is that even though your first foot in the door is so important, no matter kind of almost no matter the pay, no matter if you have to travel, all those things, you just want to get in. At some point, you do have to take that step back. And for me, I went back to them and said, hey, I do really want to start as soon as I can, but firstly, I want to see through the full launch of Rome. I don't want to leave my team at Feral a man down on launch just as things, start to get crazy. So I bought myself a bit of leeway there. And also, I've been working crunch for about 3 months up until that point, and I said to them, I really just need a break before I can start, working again. So I negotiated a couple of weeks break. But yeah, then I accepted my job. I started 2 weeks ago. The benefits, I mean, I'm sure you guys can imagine, but the benefits of working at a company like Epic Games, who Mediatonic is fantastic. Like today, told them I wanted to do this talk with you guys. They were like, no problem, don't have to take holiday. It's fine. We want to give back. I get 75 days holiday a year, which I don't like saying out loud because it sounds crazy, but our office shuts for multiple times a year just to give people time off, which is awesome. And some people will, I saw one of the questions in the Discord, which I don't want to ruin the Q&A session, but I saw one of them was like, how do I approach money getting into the industry? The main thing is don't worry too much about money. Like the games industry is profitable and that money does filter down. Yes, your first step in the industry is probably not going to pay fantastically well, but to put this into perspective, since Sports Interactive to where I'm now, I've tripled my pay. So like, you will be compensated if you are worth something to your company, and and moving jobs obviously can help with that, with negotiating payment, but getting your foot in the door is so much more important than worrying about what your first paycheck is going to be. So now I'm going to move on to so what does that mean for you guys? Like, how does my knowledge of and kind of my route into QA help you guys get into the industry? Because I remember hearing a stat when I was at university that only 12% of people who graduated got into the industry, and that freaked me out because I was like, that is such a small percentage. And I also found another stat which said 13% of people get first, and I didn't get a first. And so does that mean everyone who gets first are the only people who get a job? And that's just not the case at all. The reason the percentage is so low is just because it's such a competitive industry. But in the UK, the industry is I mean, it's doing it all around the world, but it's blowing up. So now's actually a great time to get into the industry. Companies are massively expanding. I saw James Tucker's posts all the time on LinkedIn with the companies who are accepting jobs. I think my company, Mediatonic, have got 60 jobs on the website right now. Companies are expanding because of COVID. They've all had a huge influx of money for the last year, and so they're all greenlighting projects that they weren't before. So don't worry too much about that. But these are the normal routes that people think about the games industry when they want to go in, right? So most of you here would have studied design, art, or programming, and that's going to be your dream job, and that's where you want to be. What people don't study is mainly QA. Like no one studies QA. You think it's just game testing, right? And people don't study production, which is something you guys may not even really think of right now, but everyone, again, who's here talking today will tell you how important production is, which if you've really enjoyed your FMP and doing your FMP and managing the time and the structure and how other people in your teams work, that's what production is effectively in the games industry. QA you don't study, and so people don't really understand what it is. And so this is kind of a breakdown of what everyone thinks QA is. And although I'm not going to argue with the top right picture and say that you don't gain weight when you join the games industry and stuff, but what QA effectively is we complete systematic testing of features. So it's not just always playing, like we rarely just get to play the game. That's rarely ever something that we do. And I'm sure for the same as you guys doing in your FMP, you want to complete very specific parts of testing to make sure that something works. That's what we do. So something comes down the pipeline and we create systematic tests to make sure it's working. That can be in any discipline, right? So yeah, we actually specialize in areas. So as a design student and someone who cares about that and level design, most of my QA is now utilized in that area. So I'm specialized in that area. And the same way that I have my team, there's someone who specializes in art, people who specialize in programming. And all of those people studied programming and art at university. We work closely with all the teams to plan future test suites, so we understand what's coming down the pipeline effectively. You can become embedded within a team. So a good example is my teammate John yesterday. He cares about programming, and he now works only with the programmers as their personal QA tester before the builds even get to our team. So he's just fully involved, and I'm sure sometime soon he's just going to get promoted to being a programmer on the project, because he's showing his usefulness in that role without actually having the role. So we are all involved in most meetings. I'm trying to speed up it because I realize I'm waffling. But we are involved in all of the disciplines that are shown. So I get to go into the program. I know nothing about programming. I mean, I'm sure Costas or someone could attest that, but I get to go to all the meetings, so I know what's coming down the pipeline. I know something's going to be crazy that's coming, right? And sometimes, honestly, we do just get to play the game. I don't like admitting this to people, but we do sometimes just get to play the game, and a lot of our job is playing games, which is awesome. So how does the pipeline work in the industry? So what happens is design will design a feature usually, and production will ask them how long that will take. And as they filter down and have lots of meetings, production basically come up with a time of, okay, this is how long it's going to take. Devs will start coding the feature, artists will start making it look pretty. And this could be anything, it could be a level, it could be a tool, it could be a character, it could be anything. And then production go, oh, QA, this is great. Everyone's finished on the work. Can you just sign it off? It must be complete now, right? And then we're like, no, this thing is an absolute shit show. There's nothing's working. The code doesn't work. The materials are broken. And so we have to find the time to send it back up the pipeline to get it fixed, to make sure that it's ready for launch. So we are literally, as a QA team, involved in everything. So if that's something, if you're an artist and you can't find a role in art, if you look for roles in QA, which as a games company, most games company, their QA department will be bigger than most of the other departments. So there will be roles available in QA. You're still involved in that heavily. You can still be heavily involved in the art side of making a game, even within QA. So in summary, don't overlook QA as a route into the industry. Okay, I still am on the path, and I spoke about it when I joined Meditonic, is, I'm on a path to going into design, and that's where I'm going. And now I'm in a really cool company to do that, who, are building awesome games that people want to play. And it can be anything. If you're an artist or a programmer or a designer, QA can suit you. And if you're at the right company, they'll also help you. So at the companies I've been at, they've helped my quest to be a designer in terms of giving me time with designers, paying for courses, everything that goes with that. Networking is so vital. Make yourself open to work on LinkedIn. Please do that. If you don't do that, you're never going to get seen. Post updates regularly. Add internal recruiters and add me, and just look through my connections and go and add everyone you see that you think might be interesting on my LinkedIn. So please, if I literally get 100 connections, I'll be happy. So please just add me, that's fine. Message me on LinkedIn, and go to events. Kelly mentioned it just for a brief second, that, events are so important. Women in Games and BAME host fantastic open events for everyone, and they're genuinely fantastic. And especially now that everything's online, you can go to an event every day of the week in the games industry if you wanted to. So go to those, you get to network. Some of them will have team events built into them, and it's just another way to increase your network. And that's it. So I hope I gave you guys some useful information.